transmitter and receiver, and you get a nice, clear signal like people dialing to the dial and hearing us today. The same is true with the Earth and all of the living things on the Earth, including us. But in between the stations, it's just static. No harm, no foul. That's what we need to learn to express. And so much of the work in this area has been classified for weapons application, yet the understanding of sort of what areas and what energy ranges do you avoid, we used to think it was just high-energy, heat-producing kind of energy, but it's not. The subtle energies also have huge effects, and we can segregate that through knowledge and then run our technologies in a much safer, conducive way. In fact, there are certain energy fields that actually increase our potential health-wise rather than depress it. And so we need to be more mindful of what we're doing and be more deliberate in it so that we don't interfere with people and living creatures, and that we're good stewards on this planet in a balanced and an appropriate way.
In your gut, Dr. Nick Begich, do you believe humanity is going to make it to a Type 1 civilization? For those that don't know, that means a civilization viable, not just bound to this planet. I mean, will humanity survive? Because the attitudes and the behaviors of the globalists is they seem to in a social Darwinistic way, just embrace anything, no matter how horrible, and they make a lot of self-destructive, nihilistic statements, and they claim there's this big method to their madness, and they're good at screwing stuff up and stealing and robbing, right. But I don't have a lot of confidence unless free humanity forces a renaissance of real debate and then takes control of our global civilization and forces a real debate about this. I don't have a lot of hope for us, and I unfortunately, don't even know if I'll be able to live to see grandchildren if we don't turn this around. What's your gut tell you?
Well, I am obviously concerned, or I wouldn't be engaged in the work. And I joke with people, I call myself a pathological optimist, because I still think there's a way for humanity through this. I just really believe that, and I believe it on a fundamental basis. I think that human beings, and this is my personal belief, you can debate it or not, but I believe that human beings are created in the image of a creator, and that means a lot more than some physical form walking around eating Cheerios. We are very potent as human beings, each and every one of us. There is no insignificant human on this planet. I don't care what you think, where you think you sit at the moment. You have the ability, we each have the ability to step forward into what we are and what we've been created to be, which is a much different way of living than the way we're living now, as really slaves in so many respects, under so many different systems that control every aspect of our lives.
Beautifully said. The globalists have created really like a false, almost zoo-like humanarium type system where we're in a fake habitat, a false habitat, and they're slowly changing the habitat and more towards a dehumanizing control grid. And I agree, the dynamic, limitless creativity of the human spirit, and I want us to have that destiny. I'm saying if we don't, those of us that can see it intellectually and feel it in our gut and know it, if we don't act on our survival instincts and then intellectually and scientifically face this and blow the horn, warning people, I think the globalists are going to destroy all of us.
I think you're right on that, and I think it is up to us. And when you talk about mind control issues, and I've researched them now for many, many years, and the biggest thing that the military discovered in all of this wasn't the kinds of things people usually default to out of fear. It's about the Manchurian kind of candidate, or about manipulating me or each of us to do certain things, that kind of feeling of imposition and the fear that goes with it. And here is the reality of fear and worry and anxiety. Is if you look at an EEG, brain activity of people experiencing those emotions, the kind of brain activity you see is not associated with intellectual processing of any great degree. It's not associated with the kind of thinking and higher-ordered capability that humans often demonstrate. Those brain waves are only demonstrated when you're experiencing the emotions of compassion, empathy, love.
Yes.
And those emotions are associated with higher-ordered thinking. And that higher-ordered thinking happens to be associated, and this is what military research and mind control showed, with what are called anomalous human capabilities, or what used to be called a few thousand years ago gifts of the spirit in some quarters, other things in other quarters. how we use our gifts and what those are intended to do will change the face of this planet. And I believe that, absolutely believe
I
it.
totally agree, Dr. Begich, and I want you to elaborate on this. That's why the social engineers who are greedy and wicked, who know these secrets and consciously decide to dumb us down so that we're not in the equation of having any input on the type of civilization we build. That's why everything they do is to create a false, almost matrix of disinformation and media control to suppress us within small boxes. And for me, at a gut level, that is the ultimate crime against the species, the ultimate crime against who we are. And I just burn with a desire to defeat these people.
Well, and I think that is possible. It doesn't take millions and millions of people to make change in the world. It takes one or two to see it slightly differently and and I won't say sound the alarm like you're in a panic, but to awaken the rest of our brothers and sisters on this planet to our possibilities. And I think that's where so much of what we've seen is about tearing things down rather than building them up. And we have an opportunity to build one another up. This planet can, I say this loudly, it can support the billions of people that live here. No one arrived by accident, and anyone who believes that, I think, has missed the deeper meaning of this experience. And we have an opportunity. This generation is the generation that will decide whether or not we have a world that frees us to our higher possibilities and potentials, or continues to suppress us in really what is a scripted program. I mean, you're not watching the programs. We are the programs, and we can either change it by recognizing what we are and move forward. And I think that's really the challenge, and it's each of us overcoming our own anxieties and fears and worries and starting to step in with confidence, knowing, A, that we're not alone. There are, in fact, millions of people doing the same thing. And we don't have to wait for some formal organization to form. We're already standing in it. It was created long ago. It's the human race. And we need to rise to the potential that was given us as our birthright and claim it back and change the world around us. I mean, it's so easy, I know, to get lost in the fear and worry of the times we're facing economically, socially, technologically. But, we are at a crossroads, and everyone feels it and everyone knows it. And again, I want to emphasize there are no insignificant events. People need to step into what they believe to be right and true, begin acting responsibly, not with fear and worry, but with confidence, knowing that each step we take is a step in a different and a right direction.
Wow, Dr. Begich, so beautifully said, extremely profound. I think that's some of the most powerful things you've ever said on this broadcast, of many powerful broadcasts. I want to talk more about this awakening, and you can feel it, I can feel it, we can see it. The awakening is on, and the global controllers are throwing everything they can at us right now to try to suppress that awakening. Why are they so afraid of it? We'll ask the doctor on the other side. Okay, folks, Dr. Nick Begich will be with us about 15, 20 minutes of the next hour. We will take some calls for Dr. Nick Begich specifically on any questions you've got, but please call in for Dr. Nick Begich, 800-259-9231, 800-259-9231. Dr. Begich, we were talking during the break about the global social engineers. We know there's several different power blocks. And I know they know these secrets that we're discussing here, but they've made the conscious decision to do dehumanizing things so they greedily can control the future. And I was asking you, how can they know these great truths and consciously turn against those? How, when they tune in to what those of us that have discovered the larger scope of reality, how could they gaze upon this and the human potential and decide to engage in the type of activities they are?
Well, firstly, I'll tell you two things that are very telling in this. Is firstly, what all that research showed was that people have these capabilities latent within us. In fact, there's 2 studies being done by DARPA now in California for looking at methods for figuring out how telepathy works, mental telepathy, knowing what people think. Now imagine yourself being in the New World Order crowd and the population knowing what you think. There's a lot of people with a lot of dark secrets that would prefer not to have them open in the light of day. And that's again, part of this fear is if people really had these potentials active in their lives on a regular basis, there would be no place to hide. We'd be laid bare. I mean, think about it. All of our sins good things that have happened in our life laid bare.
But that's already there, just people don't know how to recognize it. And I don't want to get off into this, but I've had many dreams that come true exactly. Constantly, I mean, it's just constant. And then most people just don't know how to recognize that it's already there, that we're already electromagnetically tied into everything.
Yeah, and the fact is, every once in a while we get little glimpses, and all of us have experienced that. We go, wow, that was really interesting. But here's what also is known, is that there's specific biological activity that is associated with those kinds of events. And this is where the science went in the 60s and 70s, is figuring out, hey, can we make someone else experience these same kinds of things? And as they discovered that everybody, every human has a natural capacity for these things, it scared the heck out of them. And then the question, well, how do you control this kind of activity from breaking out, within populations where they can actually be free? You do it with fear and worry, because you really, I'm telling you, is if you look at this with scientific instruments to measure brain activity, you cannot, I repeat, you cannot reach higher states of consciousness as long as you are worried and fearful. And think back on your upbringing in terms of how people related to fear and how fear was used, and you really recognize how powerful it is, but how evil it is at the base to use that to motivate people rather than the logic and the good sense of good argument. And that's what's driving so much. And here's the other part of the problem, is the planners, military planners. In the military in the West, it's in a closet because they're not run by the military, they're run by the civilian sector. And the reason for that is military has to have this sort of paranoid mindset where they think of every horrible thing that could ever happen and then build a plan to safeguard the country. That's their job, and I don't begrudge them for it. In fact, I'm glad they're there doing that job. But because that thinking has to do with distrust, has to do with dealing with the evilest of evil, people then look at this as, okay, what do we do to get on top of it, to keep people from falling into these positions? And then you have bureaucrats deciding that maybe they know best what people ought to be thinking.
Well, they call it full-spectrum dominance. They say the truth must be guarded by a bodyguard of lies. They fill every vacuum of possible evil in the name of full-spectrum dominance, but they have now become evil. They have not defeated all the avenues of other evil by filling every criminal spectrum.
Right. It's like the war on terror is supposed to reestablish freedom. We got the most oppressed, surveyed society ever.